Okay, today I'm going to go over the start of creating your composite image based on the textures and items that we took and isolated so that we can create some overlays and build our composite image. So I've got my two patterns that I'm going to work with today opened up in Photoshop already. I've got my ash bark, and then I've got the bottom of a pine cone that I took a image of, and then using my magic wand tool got rid of all the stuff in the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a new document or a new photo. This is going to take a little bit. We're going to start a new photo, create a new image. It's going to be a large format because we want to be able to print poster size if we can. And we really want space to build things on it. Our photo images that are in there already are fairly large, so this will allow us to create something poster size. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to do, we'll just call it texture composite. Texture composite image. I want my width to be 24 and my height to be 36. Okay, so this is a pretty common poster size. You'll notice the orientation changes to portrait instead of landscape. My color mode, you can do RGB or CMYK. I think CMYK is easier because printers print in CMYK. Color printers print in CMYK instead of RGB. Okay, so my background I'm just going to leave white, and then I'm going to hit create. So the first thing it gives me is my blank. We come over here and we look at our layers. Our background layer is locked. We're not going to be able to do anything with that, and that's fine. That's just kind of there to build on top of. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start working with my pine cone. So I'm selecting my pine cone. Oops, I don't want to do that. Okay, I want to have my pine cone, and I'm going to copy it. So I'm just going to hit Control C. From that, I'm going to come into my texture composite. I'm going to place it by hitting Control V. What this is going to allow me to do is move it around. Okay, and then what I can do is I can resize it. When I go to resize it, I'm going to want to scale it. So I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, Scale. It's going to give me a box around it that allows me to enlarge it and shrink it, and then I can move that. So I want a larger one, so I'm going to put that up here in my upper right hand corner. Now anytime I add a new one, okay, if I click off of that and I hit Control V, you'll notice what happens is it creates another layer. Right? So what this allows me to do is I can move these, and right now this is on top of this one. If I want to move it so that this is behind this one, all I have to do is take my layer and drag it below the previous layer. Okay, this little halo around it is from my magic wand tool on the original photograph. On this, there's a little bit of a halo around this. I could have gotten rid of it if I went in and made sure I got every little edge, but for right now it doesn't bother me. It's not that big of a deal. So I can transform. If I do free transform, what that's going to allow me to do is I can come in here and it's going to allow me to just do that automatically. Okay, so I can move it around automatically. So if this layer is selected, the next time I go to add a pine cone, okay, and I hit Control V, it's going to add it right above that one, but behind the other one. Okay, so it's going to build between those two. So I always try to have it on the top layer, and you can even pull this off of your toolbar so it's by itself and extend it so you can really start to see all your layers build, so that this allows you to move them around. It will say the same thing for each layer, which is fine for now. because you're not really naming it because it's really kind of the same object on all of them. So now I've got this. Transform is going to allow me to make it bigger. Now it's on all of them, but I really want it below all of them. There. So I can continue to build up that way. Okay. If I use Command T, okay, if I go in here, Command T, it'll automatically give that. That's your quick key for free transform. And I'm going to vary the size on some of these. I'm going to make some of them bigger, some of them smaller, so that I've got some variation in here. And I'll move them around a little bit so that they're in front and behind of some. And I'm going to build up my image that way. Okay. I'll keep it in front of that one. So once I've got my background built, now I want to go in and I want to start to mess with my color a little bit. So I'm going to choose this one first. I'm going to go into my image. I can do mode because I could go grayscale. I can change my color here. I'm going to leave it as CMYK though, and I'm going to go into my adjustments. I can change my color balance. So what this is going to allow me to do is I can do highlights that I'm changing and messing with. Okay, so I'm really kind of working within the existing color palette that's there, and I'm only changing it just a little bit. I can do mid-tones, which allows me to change it, and you'll see that these kind of change on top of themselves. My shadows. Yeah, so you can do some really cool. I can turn it red so it almost looks like a flower, you know, and then add some blue to that. Gets me my purplish side. You know, and change my colors. And when you're changing your colors, I would suggest you go with some sort of color scheme throughout, so that there's some continuity. If you just have a whole bunch of random different colors in the background, it starts to get a little busy and looks a little odd. So the example that's hanging up in the classroom goes from brownish yellow down to a green with the ginkgo leaves that are in the background. Okay. So as I do this, I'm going to go through and I'm going to change the colors on a bunch of different ones. I could also go into hue and saturation. Okay, and I can change my hue and play with my color that way so that it's really more of a single color that I'm dealing with. So if I want like purples and reds, I can do that. And then within that, I can then play with my color balance even more. Okay, so as I continue to do that, I can go through and I can build up this whole image. If I really want to go to the blue side of things, let's do hue and saturation. So I can do really heavy in the blues. I could even come down here, you know, and I can choose what I want. Really get my saturation up. Change my lightness and darkness. Okay, and you'll see it kind of happen throughout here. Do that, it changes things. Okay, so what this allows me to do is adjust kind of in there. Once I've kind of got all this built up, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in my other texture, okay, which I want to select. I'm going to copy that with with my Control C, and then Control V is going to place it on top here. Again, it's small. We're going to want to adjust it. So I'm going to hit Command or Control T. That allows me to freeform transform it, and I can bring it. I can make it bigger. So if there's a certain section that I really want to isolate, kind of over the top, I can do that. Or I can make it the size of the thing itself. Okay. Then what I can do is I can play with opacity in here if I really want to. And that's gonna it's gonna dull that a little bit. I can also go in and you'll notice it doesn't allow me to adjust my color because I took the color out of it, okay, when I did that. So this is just going to be a grayscale. If you really want color on that level, you're going to have to create, you're going to have to select and create a new texture with the color still in it, or bring the color back into it, okay. But this really is just more about creating it so that you've got areas of light and dark of a single color. It's also going to allow me, I can change the opacity even further so that it becomes even lighter, so that this shows up and it just kind of looks like a texture over the surface of that. And then I'm going to build up my layers that way. Okay. So as you do this composite, change my fill with my opacity, but really that just kind of brings everything else out to the front. Okay, so we still want this texture to show up over the top, but how much of it or how little of it kind of depends on how you want to work with your fill and your opacity for that. So just build up layers so that you're able to create this new composite image that builds over the whole space. So what I would do is I would then go in and I would continue to add the pine cones down through the background. And then I have this bark texture. Maybe over the top over the top of the bark I'd then go add a leaf texture, or I'd get a picture of pine needles and add pine needles in there and things like that, just to kind of go with the whole theme of the pine cones and everything. So build your composite image, make sure you're saving it as you go so that you have it, and I would suggest changing the color once you've got several in place, so that you can really start to work with a color scheme that fits the whole thing. So I layered it. If I want to go back and really adjust my colors, I can click on that eye to hide that layer, as we've done before. Like I said, this will create a series of layers with each new piece that you put on, so you don't necessarily need to create the layers yourselves unless you're building something new. Okay, so build your composite image, make sure you save it as a PNG or JPEG, so that we are able to print it out as a photograph.